Hello, fans and friends. The DSN Fantasy Factory is back after a hiatus, and we are here on the eve of fantasy football season. The preseason is finally here for us. We are finally getting football back. Finally. And with that, very special, localized version of the show today. The DSN Fantasy Factory is here for all of your fantasy football advice throughout the season. And what we are going to be doing today is we are going to be going to TierMaker in order to get a full and fulfilling ranking of the Detroit Lions players from their fantasy value perspective. This is interactive as well. We are going to be sharing the exact same TierMaker list that I am using today. We are going to have that link out on all of our socials, so please fill that out. I'll go through how to do that at the end, and we really want to see it. Share it with us. Share it on the DSN pages, whether Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, what have you. We want to see your input and see what the community thinks of these Detroit Lions players as well. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. And this here on TierMaker is our list. And so we have 5 tiers that we are going to be ranking 10 guys from the Detroit Lions. Their images are down here on the bottom. The rankings go this way. We'll go from the worst kind of to the best, and I'll kind of explain what the criteria we're looking for each one is. So the ignore/waiver wire pickup, that one kind of explains itself in terms of, at least for drafting purposes, pretty much ignore it, and waiver wire only if the situation winds up arising for that. Now the roster spot, 1 to 10 range, this is a guy towards the end of either your snake draft or somebody that maybe you're picking up off of waivers right after your draft if you're doing any sort of roster tinkering. This is going to be extremely important to have as a kind of depth to your roster. Next up is the 5th round to 10th round range to the $12 range. Now obviously these rounds can wind up going a little longer, but we're talking towards the back half of your draft, or if you're auctioning, putting a little bit of change out there after all the big spending is over, seeing if you have another guy that you're putting into your 7th, 8th, 9th roster spot. We're looking at like flex kind of players with this one. And then we move up here and we have the 2nd round to 4th round, 30+ range. These are guys that can be real sleeper picks, can really take it out from under everybody else and kind of get some really good value for it. But again, this is going to be not elite, but one rung down from elite. And then at the very top, we have ourselves our 1st round and $45 plus range. This is obviously going to be going to Quintez Cephas, who we don't have on the list here. I'm kidding, of course. This is somebody that you are getting in your first 10, first 12 picks if you're in a snake, and then obviously for bidding purposes, $45 plus. There's only really one person that I can even put in this range. But enough of the waffling. Let's get right into it. We've explained the rankings here, and again, you are able to make this yourself. We'll be sharing this out. What you'll be doing is exactly the same thing as I'm doing here. All you're doing is picking the images here, putting them into the list. Once you save it, after you link your Twitter account, as you can see, there I am right there with my Pimp Gang Grimace, Bear on the Block. Follow for more stuff like this, and you will be able to save it. You can share it, and then we also see everybody who's done the list too, which is really cool because we get an actual community ranking, so we can actually go back and kind of react to that after the people get their say. So, first guy up on the list, we're going to go here. I am going to actually kind of get this one out of the way right here. Austin Seibert, we have right there. We are going to ignore /wire pickup on Austin Seibert. I don't have much to say regarding this guy. He is actually right now in a kicking duel, as it were, so we are not really going to be putting any credence to him at all. What we are going to have next, however, is going to be the Detroit Lions defense. I'm going to put them over here right now. These guys are just kind of an indicator of the Detroit Lions defense. interesting, kind of, right? The Detroit Lions defense, especially for those leagues where yards matter, I definitely would say maybe not pick them up. However, I mean, there is a lot of sack potential with this team. The defensive front is now very serious. We can wind up seeing a lot of turnover for here. I'm still putting the Detroit Lions defense right now as an ignore waiver wire pickup, but they're definitely a roster spot, a 1 to 10 range. They definitely move up here if/when they make that pretty decent improvement. And I'll tell you one thing, they are definitely a streamline play whenever they're playing the Chicago Bears, though. So I will tell you that they're definitely worth it if they play any defense that plays the Bears this year. I promise. As a Bears fan myself, I promise you want to have the Detroit Lions or whatever defense and have them playing for that week. So now that we actually get into the players here, let's go ahead and start out kind of from left to right here. And so we have first up is DJ Chark. Now, DJ Chark is somebody that I've kind of alluded to in the past. He was in our rankings, actually, for some of the news that has been coming out following Jamison Williams. I think that DJ Chark is a potential 5th round, 10th round, 12th plus guy because of the first round connection that he has. He has that deep connectability. We've seen what he's capable of further down the field. He's not going to be taking a lot of those mid-range targets that Hawkinson, DeAndre Swift, and Ammon Raw St Brown are going to have. Now, the thing is, we don't know what the offense looks like down the field. Is Jared Goff really going to be able to have the reins released, so to speak, to just airmail it over to Chark's way where he succeeds the best? I don't know. This is a pretty tepid one, and as we go further down, we're going to rank within these tiers, but I will put DJ Chark as a 5th to 10th round right now with a $12 plus bid option. I think right around $15 isn't that high for him. Jamal Williams, I'm actually going to be putting here as well. The difference is that I'm actually going to be putting him ahead of DJ Chark. I think he's actually on the higher range, $15 to $18. He is one of the best backups in the entire NFL. I love his attitude. I mean, I chose this photo for him for a reason. It just kind of gives the vibe of what he's really about. And on top of that, if DeAndre Swift does have any sort of injury issues, Jamal Williams is absolutely a flex to an RB2 or 3 play. So 5th round to 10th round, I think he's a real value get, and especially one of the rules that we kind of gave out, tips and tricks that we had earlier on our first episode here on the Fantasy Factory. We said you should always be spelling yourself, and Jamal Williams is a perfect spell. If you have DeAndre Swift, it is almost essential that you get Jamal Williams, and so that partially plays into his value here as well. Now we move on to somebody who I think may wind up being a bit overpriced, frankly, but I'm still going to be putting him into that 2nd to 4th round range, $30+ for Ammon Raw St Brown. One thing that we talked about here on the Fantasy Factory, targets matter, and Ammon Raw St Brown made it for me. I got him in a waiver wire pickup, I believe, after week 10, if I'm not mistaken, and I won my league last year. He was a major part of it because he was getting so many targets down the stretch. You look at what Ammon Raw St Brown's output in production looked like once the Lions started to really start winning, especially also considering that Jared Goff is his quarterback. A lot of those short intermediate routes, a lot of those targets. If you're PPR specifically, Ammon Raw St Brown is definitely in this tier range. If you are not in PPR, I may actually slot him down a little further. I don't think he's going to go for $12, but I definitely think he's going in the higher 5th to 7th round range, maybe $20 or so for him in terms of auction. However, for PPR, which that's what my league is, a half point, and if it's a full point, forget about it. You absolutely put him here. That is where I would value Ammon Raw St Brown. And then next we have, from a really high impact guy in the passing game to somebody with a little bit of questions, this is going to be Mr. Reynolds. I am going to be putting Mr. Reynolds in the wire pickup. Not so much the ignore for draft purposes, but I would say he's a wire pickup guy depending on how this guy DJ Chark does. It's going to really depend. Ammon Raw St Brown is going to be the siphon for targets. We already know that. But how is Chark doing? Is he getting up into that 5 to 7 target range, or is Reynolds the preferred because he is going to be more in that intermediate area of their passing game? Again, I think that Reynolds is a wire pickup at best. It depends on how deep your league is. If you're a 12-man league, definitely probably somebody to at least keep an eye on. If you're 10 or 8 players instead, in terms of owners, I should say, for your league, I don't know. I would be kind of tepid on that. Jared Goff is going to be our next, the QB extraordinaire for many people who a lot of folks think can actually wind up hampering this football team. I don't know about that. I think he's going to be perfectly fine. It very much depends if you have a super flex or not. If you have a super flex, I think that he's actually a bit of a value. I'm still going to put him here on the ignore/wire pickup, more towards the wire pickup. If you put all your eggs into one QB basket like a Josh Allen, and you don't go quarterback high, say either first to fourth rounds, or if you go $30 plus on a quarterback, maybe he's somebody that you want to just kind of slot in at the end. You don't pay anything for him, throw him off the waivers if a guy gets hurt in the last week of preseason or in that intermediate period before the games actually start. Other than that, not much else to say about Jared Goff. He's a reliable 14 to 18 point kind of quarterback, which for some people can do wonders if the rest of your roster does well. He's not going to carry you, though, that's for sure. Next, we are going to have TJ Hawkinson. Now, Hawkinson is tough because from fantasy perspective, he can be argued anywhere from a top 3 tight end to a top 5 to a top 10. It depends on scheme, obviously, is one thing, but also depends on some other guys around him. Individuals who TJ Hawkinson is at least ranked amongst. You obviously have Travis Kelce, pretty much guaranteed number 1. You have Darren Waller, who comes out of this. You have Mark Andrews is another guy. George Kittle from San Fran, and especially now that we know for certain that Trey Lance is going to be the starter instead of Jimmy Garoppolo, there is some questions there about whether or not Kittle is going to be kind of a safety valve, especially considering that Deebo Samuel has, I think there's a clause in his contract for him carrying the ball now. And so he may be in that running back slot, meaning that a lot of those passing targets, that kind of that check down for Lance is going to be higher. But for Hawkinson, I am uncomfortable putting him into this second tier entirely because has really high, and fandom is kind of speaking to that. I don't think he's a top 3 tight end for fantasy purposes. Kittle and Kelce, I would have the 2Ks. I would have them ranked above him. I think Darren Waller, being in the offense that he's in, he was at a down year last year, which is going to kind of drop his value. But between the two, if it were Waller and Hawkinson, I take Waller instead, which is going to push Hawkinson here, let's right there, ahead of Jamal Williams. I'd say 5th, 6th round. I'd say $23, $24 plus. I am uncomfortable telling you to take a reach in the 4th round to get him, though, unless your league is insane and there's that crazy run on tight ends. I just think in that range, towards that end of the 4th, or for auction purposes, when guys start going more in the 30s, it's tough. Like, I know that we here in Detroit are going to understand, obviously, his fantasy value, checkdowns and everything that Jared Goff is going to have, and Hawkinson's going to get his, especially before Jamison Williams comes into the picture. But in terms of his position, I'm just uncomfortable putting him that high. Ammon Raw St Brown is a top 10, top 15 fantasy receiver in a PPR. He's even higher. With Hawkinson, he's I'd say probably 4th or 5th for his position, and so that reflects in his position here. Tight end, it's tough, right? Receiver, just because there's so many more spots, he's just more it's just more valuable. Ammon Ra is more valuable than TJ Hawkinson is for fantasy. Now comes maybe my hottest take of this entire list, and this is something that I will match with a homegrown talent here. Mike Valeni loves this dude. Obviously, kind of gives the game away, but I have DeAndre Swift. I'm just going to put him right up there. I think he's a first-round pick and a 45+, and here is why. DeAndre Swift, for all the injuries that everyone loves to throw his way, he has played 13 games last season, and he had 1,069 yards from scrimmage. He had over 600 yards rushing, over 480 yards receiving. PPR, it's not even a question. If I'm PPR, he's absolutely a top 10 pick. I would put him right slotted in there in about a running back 7 through 9, something like that. The first round is almost always running backs. Again, it depends on your league size. If you're 8 to 10, maybe he gets pushed to the second round only slightly. But I mean, I'm talking where you want this guy. Now, obviously, like I talked about before, you want to have Jamal Williams as a spell for him, but DeAndre Swift's value is just almost immeasurable because he has been hurt, so his full season of production, you don't really know what that looks like, but this could be completely just like a Dalvin Cook situation where Cook was hurt on and off and on and off, and then all of a sudden, boom, he exploded. And the thing about it is that DeAndre Swift is much more of a receiving back, so if you're PPR, it speaks for itself. You have a guy who is going to be an Austin Eckler type of guy. I actually think Swift may be a better actual true runner. Eckler's more of what I call a spell back, which in the past I've used kind of derogatorily, but I don't mean it for Eckler's sake. Eckler is definitely a top 5 value running back for fantasy purposes. He definitely carried me. But with guys like that who are out in the backfield, they do get hit more often from linebackers crashing down, defensive ends on screens, things like that. You're going to want to spell him. If you're using a first-round pick on DeAndre Swift, you need to get Jamal Williams, because if for whatever reason DeAndre Swift is hurt, Jamal Williams has taken every bit of the work that DeAndre Swift would have had. Now, Swift, when he's healthy, is an absolute starter. I'd say a RB 1.5 to 2, even a 1 depending on the matchup. And Jamal Williams, if Swift is hurt, is, like I said, an absolute flex spot at the least, but an RB 2-3 type of guy there as well. So I think out of the whole bunch of the Detroit Lions offense, DeAndre Swift's value is where it is the highest. I think the injuries are worth it. This guy is not like Christian McCaffrey. He is not made of glass. And for, again, PPR purposes, it just speaks for itself. And lastly is going to be the question mark. The most unknown and the one that I think is going to be the most interesting to see how everybody else values this guy. And that is going to be Jamison Williams. We know baked in he's going to be out for at least a third of the season, maybe longer. I actually did a bit of news for the last Fantasy Factory where we were looking into how Dan Campbell was speaking about Jamison Williams. And now that Hard Knocks is out there, you're going to be able to really intimately see the development of how Jamison Williams' injury is going. It really, really does not sound like he is going to be seeing the field anytime soon. His value is hurt by that. However, if you play this smart, his value on this tier board is not going to reflect his impact on your fantasy team. I am going to slot Jamison Williams at the top here, ahead of Hawkinson, because number one, I think his value is going to be higher because while Hawkinson is going to get more of the money or higher up in the snake draft, Jamison Williams is going to be somebody that's a value pick. There are going to be a lot of people who are going to be very cautious. And it depends on obviously how your league goes. You know your league owners better than I do. A lot of times, league owners, especially because this is primarily a Detroit-based fandom that we have here at DSN, obviously, a lot of these guys are going to be overvalued. There's going to be reaches on these guys. Specifically, I think Hawkinson is going to be one that is going to get reached way too far. Swift, I actually think, may wind up going a little lower than that. Ammon Raw St Brown is going to be right in this range. I think Jamison Williams is going to be somebody everybody's going to be scared about. For one thing, I think that they're going to make a mistake in thinking that Ammon Raw's value is tangentially connected to Jamison Williams. I disagree with that because Jamison Williams is a deep threat. He's a speedster. He's a guy, not a speedster in the same way that Ammon Raw is. I just mean he gets off that ball, he gets down that field, whereas Ammon Raw's strength is in his route trees and is in his volume of targets. Jamison Williams is going to be a Deshaun Jackson kind of guy. I don't think he has that kind of speed, especially coming off of the injury that he has. However, Jamison Williams is somebody that come playoff time, in the same way that Ammon Raw helped me last year, I think he can get you over the edge. If you're dwindling there in the mid-tier, right, which is going to be most of the people watching this video, from third place all the way down to 8th, the guy that is going to get you over the hump is either going to be a waiver wire pickup or somebody who's going to be filling in for someone who is injured, somebody to kind of lift your team, somebody who you got in these mid-tier rounds or got off the waiver wire that is kind of a surprise. Like, oh, wow, okay. All of a sudden, look at you. And so, therefore, Jamison Williams, to me, is that guy, because the minute that he's going to be healthy, you throw him out there, you keep him out there. I don't really think there is any feasible solution for any fantasy owner to bench Jamison Williams when he's playing. When he is playing, he's going to open up the offense in a way that is going to make the Lions have a really interesting arc to their season. I think that the minute Williams comes off the bench and finally sees the field, I think this offense is going to turn to another level. I mean, look at these targets. You have DeAndre Swift, if he's healthy. You have Ammon Raw, who's going to be in the shorter end of the field. TJ Hawkinson down the middle. Then you throw Jamison Williams out in single coverage on corners, and bye-bye, there he goes. And you saw it even against fantastic defenses like the Georgia defense this past year. And then you also throw in DJ Chark as a deeper threat also. Now, DJ Chark is going to be ceding value to Jamison Williams. Those two are definitely connected. However, I think that these four are kind of like the four horsemen of the Detroit Lions fantasy apocalypse, where you can't go wrong having any of these guys. It's all about making sure that you are not wasting the rest of your roster to be a homer. Don't let your fandom ruin this. I actually have my own personal rule. I do not have Chicago Bears players on my team. Now, frankly, part of that is because the Chicago Bears offense is putrid and always has been. However, part of it is that just I don't like to have the rooting interest of my team also affect my fantasy team, because at least if one fails, then I have the other one, and I don't want them tied together, because if the Bears have a bad day on offense, as they always do, and then one of the players, so like a David Montgomery, only gets like 5 points because Matt Nagy or Eberflus or whoever doesn't use him correctly, I don't want to be frustrated about that doubly. And so I'd be cautious about taking homegrown guys, but if you're going to do it, and for me, this is more for me than you guys, because this is definitely where my mindset is at. I really think that Lions players can be really good fantasy value this upcoming season, can be guys that you can really steal if the value is not there, especially for anybody who is not in the Detroit area and doesn't have a predominantly Lions fan base of ownership in their leagues. This tier list could be something that could really help you out and get you some real value. So again, just kind of to wrap this up a little bit here on the DSN Fantasy Factory, just wanted to go over, this is on Tier Maker. You can link your Twitter in order to be able to save and download. So you can do exactly what I'm doing. Now, the way this will work is that it will actually not look like that. It'll look like this. It's just a regular chart. You can see the community rankings as well, which is really cool. You can react to it as well. We're going to have it on Facebook, have it on Twitter. We're going to have the link on YouTube as well. And over here, it's just a drag and drop. You just drag and drop the images of the guys here. Save that, download, share it with us so we can see where your mind is at. Because who knows, maybe you wind up changing my mind. Maybe if I see the community ranks and we see TJ Hawkinson is in that 2nd to 4th round tier, who knows, maybe his rank goes up in that way, or Ammon Raw St Brown up, or DeAndre Swift down. Who knows? But we want to hear from you and see the interaction here on Tier Maker, on the DSN Detroit Lion players ranked by their fantasy value. We're going to keep doing this as we get closer and closer to the season for the weeks after this. And so next week we're going to be doing a ranking list of the fantasy value for quarterbacks, then running backs, then wide receivers, getting us up until the fantasy draft. So for DSN's Fantasy Factory, I am Dylan Bear. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today with me to see the rankings, the power rank for the fantasy value for the Detroit Lions and their players. And we cannot wait to hear from the rest of the community about this. Please share your tier maker rankings with us as well. And until next time, fans and friends, thank you very much.
Man on a mission, I'ma get it. You know I be on a